Hello everyone, welcome back to GOT. This is Mark. Today we're going to talk about the new Vivo X Fold 6 that is now rumored to come out sometime in July. After silence and a late announcement, it's finally here. And we're going to talk about it and break it down. Is it a good phone? Is it going to be the phone of the year? Let's get to it. Now, the Vivo X Fold 6 is going to be very similar to that of the Vivo X Fold 5 as far as dimensions on the inside, just as well as the outside. It's going to be that tall, slender look, very similar to that of the Z Fold 7. And of course, it's going to come in a Chinese and global version. Now, having just said that, I highly recommend if you're not inside of China, get the global version. I have the Chinese version of the Vivo X Fold 5, and it did take me long to wish I had gotten the global version. Now, the Vivo X Fold 6 is coming out in some really interesting colors. Check these out. I think they're quite a bit more vibrant, especially compared to last year's. Were nice, but kind of dull. This two-tone look is pretty cool looking. Now, that aside, let's go ahead and talk about what we can expect with the new Vivo X Fold 6. Now, I've been into foldables for a long time, even going back as far as the Surface Duo. This is still a really great phone. I enjoy it every now and then. But foldables have made a lot of changes, and they keep trying to catch up with the bar phones. And of late, at least this year, what they've been doing is they've been adding 200 megapixel lenses to the cameras. Well, Vivo is the next one to do the same thing, following Samsung and Oppo. The one that stayed out of that game was the Honor Magic, which kind of surprised me. I thought they would come up. There were rumors that they would, but they stayed out of the 200 megapixel game. Now, to be honest, I'm kind of glad they did because my view of the 200 megapixel lens is very skeptical, and the fact that it's a gimmick and sales marketing ploy more than anything else. But Vivo might have a little bit of a change. They might have improved it just a little bit to make it different than the others. So stick around and hear me out, and you'll understand why. So let's go down the list of what has changed. First off, there's a processor. The chipset is different in the new Vivo X Fold 6 versus the 5. The 5 has a Snapdragon Gen 3 chip in it, and it's had that, I believe, for 2 years. They just kept the same chip the following year and then tried to sell us on upgrading something else. And right now, I just don't quite remember. But that to say that this year, they're coming out with the MediaTek Dimensity 9500. So that is an upgrade from the Gen 3 chip, but not quite up there with the Snapdragon Gen 5 Elite. So yes, the Snapdragon Gen 5 Elite is going to be more of a powerhouse compared to the Dimensity chip. However, the Dimensity chip is still a flagship chip and will perform very well. As a matter of fact, I think it may even end up beating the Snapdragon in performance. And here's why I say that. The Snapdragon Gen 5 Elite chip is a powerhouse, like I said, but because of that, it really heats up the phone, the device, the chip, whatever. And when you heat things up, it has to start throttling. It has to thermal throttle, which really slows every bit of the processing down. So if you're a game player, it's going to drop your frame rate. If you're an editor and you do editing on your phone, it's going to drop your rendering rate. And how do I know all this? Because I've tested it. Go check out any of my other videos when I compare last year's Snapdragon Gen Elite to the Elite 5. The 8 Elite actually beats the 5 simply because it doesn't throttle. And my guessing is the MediaTek Dimensity chip is made to keep that temperature down, so it's not going to throttle. I think it's going to perform very similar to what's in the Motorola, which is a Snapdragon Gen 5, no Elite. And because of that, it does not heat up. And if you don't believe me, if you've got an Elite chip 5 in your phone, go ahead and run that DMark 360. Is that what it's called? I don't know. DMark 3D, I guess, benchmark test, and you'll find that after a few seconds, the frame rate is going to drop quite a bit. Whereas on the Motorola or probably even that MediaTek Dimensity 9500 chip, they may not have that rapid speed in the beginning, but they will stay consistent, and the Elite 5 chip will actually drop below. But of course, like I always say, you can't really believe benchmarks. You have to actually do the test. And I actually have a performance test video I created if you want to check that out here. Now, the other thing that the Vivo X Fold 6 is going to get is that 200 megapixel main sensor. Now that is going to be the main camera. It's not going to be a telephoto lens. It's just going to be a stagnant main sensor, very similar to that of the Z Fold 7 and the Oppo Find N6. Now it's going to be larger than those other twos, just slightly, but it is a Samsung lens or a Samsung sensor. So it should be able to perform a little bit better and it'll allow a little bit more light in. But as you know, if you watch any of my videos, Vivo tends to allow too much light in at times. So what's different with the 200 megapixel lens in the Vivo X Fold 6 than the others? Well, the Vivo X Fold 6 is also going to get a Vivo imaging chip in that. And what that's going to do is that's going to be dedicated towards processing with the camera. And that's going to make a huge difference. I can show you real quickly here between the Vivo X Fold 5 and the Vivo X300 Pro. This one also has that chip, that imaging chip per se. So you can see the difference here in the video. It makes a huge difference. And in the Vivo X300 Pro, you can see that is a 200 megapixel lens compared to a 50 megapixel in the Vivo X Fold 5. So as you can see, that's where they're doing things a little different in the Vivo X Fold 6 is they're actually putting in an imaging chip, which will really help this thing perform. Now, does that mean it's worth buying a 200 megapixel lens or a phone with a 200 megapixel lens in it? You know, in my view, no, because the 200 megapixel myth is basically this. They tell you it captures a whole lot more, gets you a beautiful picture, all the stuff, and they'll throw a lot of tech jargon at you. But the bottom line is it still bends it down to a 12 megapixel or 12.5 megapixel image in the end, which is the same thing you get from the 50 megapixel lens. And then where Samsung makes its mistake is when you do any 3 times or 5 times zooming in, a lot of times they'll crop their 200 megapixel image and call that a zoom, when a 50 megapixel 3 times dedicated zoom lens will outperform that one every single time. And I found the same thing on all my tests with the Oppo Find N6 and the Z Fold 7. Those 200 megapixel cameras cannot outperform something as simple as the Motorola Razr Fold and its 50 megapixel lenses. Now, yes, you can save the image as a 200 megapixel image, but that file is so big, you can't hardly work with it. And if you're going to crop in on a 200 megapixel lens so you can see more, you might as well zoom and use a dedicated lens that's made for that, because you will get a better image out of a zoom lens or telephoto lens than you will a stagnant 200 megapixel lens in cropping it in. So now everything else I read and I've learned about the upcoming Vivo X Fold 6 is it's the same size as this phone. They might go a little bit thinner on the camera bump, but this one really isn't all that bad. It's going to come out with a larger battery. The rumor is it's going to have a 6,900 milliamp hour battery, where this one has a 6,000. Now, I found that the 6,000 milliamp hour batteries last me 2 and sometimes 3 days, depending on how much use. With all the testing I do, I go out and do photo shoots and everything else. I get a solid 2 days out of these phones. So I can imagine a 6,900, man, that's just crazy. You know, I do have phones with the larger batteries, such as this and the Honor Magic 8 Pro. Those are large batteries. Yes, they do last a long time. But because of that, you know, their phone's not going to be any thinner, which is great. I'm glad they're not compromising specs with a thinness of a device. Now, this phone is supposed to be released sometime in July, so I'm going to keep my eyes and ears out. You do the same. Let me know what I've missed in this video. Let me know, what do you think? Are you excited about the Vivo X Fold 6? Is that your next phone? I think that without a doubt, it will outperform most of the foldables that are out there. And it might be the only foldable that will come close to beating what I think is right now the champion, which is the Motorola Razr Fold. If you haven't seen the comparison between the Razr Fold and the Vivo X Fold 5, I want to check that out here. Until next time, stay tuned for more updates on the new phones. Until next time, have a wonderful day. God bless.